Well, Daniel Battin here on January 31, 2020, and Rick and I today, we are on our way to Mount Madison, Mount Adams, and Lord willing, conditions permitting, the presidential traverse in winter. It's a beautiful day with good weather, and you really can't see much here as it's 5 a.m. and it's not going to be light for another hour. All we got is 20 miles and 8,000 vertical feet of climbing today. Here we are on the Valleyway Trail, almost to Madison Hut. Here's where the signs for "You are entering the Alpine Zone" exist. And there's Mount Madison. That's going to be our first mountain of the day. And this is looking back out at the rest of northern New Hampshire here in all its beauty. And you can see a little bit of the Airline Ridge behind me as well. And Rick should be coming up behind me momentarily. The view of Mount Adams with the morning sun glistening on its slope was truly spectacular. As we ascended our first peak of the day, Mount Madison, the going was easy as the trail was well packed down but not icy. To the top of Mount Madison. What do you have to say, Pastor Rick?
Praise the Lord.
Yeah, it's been beautiful.
Very special.
The views with all the snow on the mountains this time definitely makes it different for me than before. Look at all this rime ice on these rocks. You can just like break that stuff off. All that was formed by freezing fog up here on the summits. Truly spectacular. So there we are, just a few steps from Madison Summit. We are looking down into King Ravine, and this is the gateway that we stopped out of the summer and saw this amazing view of Mount Madison. And here it is in the winter on January 31, and there is Mount Adams, and there is Rick Guide up there. Rick and I are now a couple hundred feet from the summit of Mount Adams. There's Mount Madison, which is from whence we came. Rick, what do you think of the hike so far here?
It's indescribable. It's beautiful.
All this rime ice on the rocks, it really is indescribable, and something that I did not get to experience last time I did this in the winter. You can see all the way over into Vermont and Maine and all over here. Once we got past Mount Adams, the going was more difficult as not as many people had packed the trails down between there and Mount Jefferson. Well, Rick and I are now here in the saddle between Mount Adams and Mount Jefferson, and we went from probably a 20 to 30 mile an hour wind on Mount Adams to totally calm conditions because of this lovely little hill over here that is shielding us. And we can see over here is Jefferson, then you have Mount Clay, and then you have Mount Washington. And way, way, way in the distance, you can see the Franconia Ridge, Mount Lafayette, and Lincoln there. Wow. So here I am hiking between Mount Adams and Mount Jefferson. You can see the footprints of the trail here, and you can see the beauty all around us. And when we look back up this way, the sky is a really deep blue here. One of the more difficult sections of the trail goes through these steep snowfields on Mount Jefferson, but it worked its way around the most difficult spots. Pretty much at the bottom of the saddle between Adams and Mount Jefferson. There's the Castellated Ridge, and then we look over this way, and there's Mount Jefferson. And the way we've got to come, we've got to traverse this snowfield, which is considered to be one of the more challenging portions of the traverse. We see Mount Washington and this huge block of, whoa, rye mice. Or is that a glacial serac ready to fall on us? I guess it's just rye mice. Here we are, just about the summit of Mount Jefferson. That's it, right there. And there's Mount Adams behind us. And there's Rick making his way up behind me here. Almost there. Once we reached Mount Jefferson, the going was much easier as the trail was packed down heading toward Mount Washington. And we could see the southern presidential peaks as well as Bretton Woods ski area. Here's Rick and I. We're hiking on into the saddle that's between Mount Jefferson and Mount Clay. And you can see Mount Washington and the Great Gulf in here. Over there's Carter Dome. Over here we see Bretton Woods ski area. We see the mountains of the Franconia section, Mount Carrigain and the southern peaks. And we're just having an amazing day here. As we approached Mount Clay, which is one of my favorite peaks because it is so scenic, the packed trail went around it. So we went around it, but gradually ascended toward Mount Washington. The ascent of Mount Washington seemed like it would never end. You gain 1,200 feet from the saddle toward Mount Washington. It's around 1:30 p.m. January 31, 2020. Working our way up Mount Washington here. This mountain is bigger than it looks from a distance, there's no question about it. And so keep trudging along, and this is what I have to look at behind me and so forth. We're gonna get there soon though, I can tell. Once you cross the cog railway, you know you're getting close to Mount Washington. And we could see the summit building, but we still had a ways upward still to go. We finally reached the summit of Mount Washington and breathed a huge sigh of relief. From the summit, you could see the northern presidential peaks from whence we had come. We could see Wildcat Mountain as well as the Bald Face peaks, which were two of my favorites. Well, here we are. Made it to the summit of Mount Washington, 2 p.m. There's Mount Madison, to the left Mount Adams, then Mount Jefferson, then Mount Clay. Here we are at the summit observation platform with the weather station and some of the other folks there. And now we're getting ready to go down the Crawford path down the much easier southern presidential range. And there's Wildcat and north and south Baldface beyond, and you can even see all the way. Earlier today we could see all the way to the ocean. We can't quite do that anymore. So all I can say, it's been a great day. It's been a blessing from the Lord, and it's been so beautiful. I almost had to pinch myself at how beautifully snow-covered the peaks are this time. Rick and I were both happy to be going downhill and knowing that the rest of our journey would be downhill except for several humps that were very short. As we descended in the southern presidentials, we noticed that over Mount Washington and Mount Jefferson were some lenticular clouds forming. It did not seem like there was much wind that day, so we were surprised to see these lenticular clouds forming. Made it to Mount Eisenhower, the last major uphill of the presidential traverse.
How do I look? Pretty tired?
Well, you're still smiling even though you're tired, so it's been a long but good day.
Hey man, I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Pain and all.
Yeah, me too. Here we are on Mount Eisenhower, headed on the way down on the trail now, and we have an amazing panorama here of the rest of the White Mountains, and there's where we're headed to Mount Pierce and then down to our car at Crawford Notch. It's been an amazing day. Yeah, congratulations, Rick. You have completed your 4,000 footers here on Mount Pierce, 5:37 p.m. There's the pile of rocks right there marking the summit.
Praise the Lord. God gets all the glory.
Yeah.
Thank you, Daniel.
And now, well, it's all about 2.8 miles of downhill walking, so.
Praise the Lord.
Yes, indeed.
Thank you.
And if we look out this way, probably can't even see Mount Washington now, but we can see it here. But we can see the moon, and we can see a planet over here. So, pretty cool. A day to remember. We arrived back at Crawford Notch with its famous elephant head at 6:45 p.m.